Welcome to the Parent Guide to GCSE podcast, and today's guest is Mel Riley, who is a child and adult family therapist, and she's here to talk to us about teen mental health and how to move families from surviving to thriving. This was originally broadcast as a live Facebook event and can still be found on the Parent Guide to GCSE Facebook page.
So Mel, do you want to just do a proper little introduction and do the official, this is who I am, this is why I'm awesome?
I'm Mel Riley. I'm an adult child and family therapy. Hello, and thank you for joining us this evening. Feeling a bit nervous. I don't do many lives. I'm much more comfortable one-to-one, but I'm sure I'll be fine. Yes, I'm an adult child and family therapist. Bit of I call myself the Mad Hatter. I love hats. I've trained in play therapy, so I'm a bit of a silly Billy, playful, lively soul. And I just have a massive passion for relationships and a massive interest in attachments and trauma that is born out of my own kind of traumatic history. And I guess my strapline is that I like to help families move from surviving to thriving. Yeah, I think that was quite good for not being rehearsed.
Very impressive. I normally have to practice mine, so I did put you on the spot there. I'm sorry.
I don't do practice. I'm neurodiverse, dyspraxic and dyslexic, and I don't do prep or planning because it just puts me into spinning loops. So I have to just go from the top of my head. And thankfully, I've got a bit of an encyclopedic head, so it works. Yeah.
Very, very handy. So let's kick off with some kind of general tips for looking after one's well-being and mental health with everything that's going on, like kind of keeping some space to yourself almost. What sort of things would you advise that parents are trying to help their children do and themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things at the moment is we're living with so much uncertainty, and that's going to churn up lots of kind of feelings in our bodies. So we might be experiencing low mood, lack of motivation, sleep disturbances, and those all come from that kind of heightened state. So anything that we can do that is calming for us, and I'm not quick to throw kind of meditation and mindfulness at people because we all find our calms in really different ways. So it is about being able to take some time to really check in with, how am I breathing, what's going on in my body, and we don't have a lot of control, and we're kind of all waiting for the world to open up again, and we don't know when that'll be. So it can feel a really long tunnel that we're all in. And I have a lovely metaphor that we all drop our torches at different times in this tunnel, and all the pain points are different. So somebody's like working flat out, somebody else doesn't have any work. And so one is take care of yourself, take care of what's going on in your own body. And parents, I think it's really important to put your own seatbelt on or your own oxygen mask on first, and really kind of check in with your own emotional states, because children are an extension of your nervous system. So if grounding yourself first, and grounding techniques can be really useful if you're kind of going up into a panicky place. Being able to kind of name 3 things that you can see, smell, touch, and taste, that helps to keep your kind of social engagement system online, stop you kind of going up even further. You're in your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain. So and that brings you back into your thinking brain out of your kind of lower kind of survival brain. Working on your heart rate can also help. If you or your child are anxious, what we can do is just take a moment to breathe a little bit easier, like a big sigh. I'm aware when I'm on lives, I get anxious, and so my regulation goes a little bit, and I talk really quickly. So practicing what I'm doing as I'm feels quite nice. I have too many words in my spaces when I'm live. So we can have a little pause, a big sigh. You'll notice if you sigh, your shoulders just give a little bit. So yeah, all the stuff that brings you back into your body can be massively useful. If you have a trauma history, being back in your body can be a bit frightening, so you may have to start really small. It might be just a few breaths while you're boiling the kettle. It might be taking time to just watch the birds for a minute. And people might be thinking, but I've got kids everywhere, how do I do this? It's really small stuff. It's really small stuff. A lot of the stuff that we would normally have access to, we don't have. So it might be just putting a movie on and taking 10 minutes out for your own sanity, because if you're not okay, then your kids aren't going to be okay. Yeah,
I think having those strategies to hand.
Absolutely.
I think most people, if they're honest, probably don't have them. They haven't really thought about how to deal with.
We operate a lot in automatic pilot, and a lot of people who maybe have anxious kind of conditions or symptoms a lot of the time may have researched and may have some grounding techniques. But what we're seeing is people who don't have any kind of history of anxiety, because we're in a pandemic and our safety is kind of compromised, and it's worrying if you go to this. Some people will have different thresholds for risk and safety. That's so many people experience anxiety who don't really have any history or kind of tools to deal with that. And if you have anything in your history that makes you feel unsafe, this kind of will throw it back up. Yeah, that those feelings of not feeling maybe safe in your body may. I've had some clients who said, I have not had any of this for years, and suddenly my body's really busy on me again. Yeah.
It just gets a bit much, I think, for everyone. Situation.
And I think you're absolutely right, Emily. It's flipping awful at times, and so you can acknowledge the stuckness, you can acknowledge the grief, the longing for all the stuff that we've kind of lost. Two things that help me, and again, I don't like shoving gratitude at people and telling them they need to be grateful, because that can really invalidate people's experiences. But one way of flipping the negatives is to kind of know that if you are okay, if there is food in the fridge and you are okay with a roof over your head, then that's a bit grounding too, in terms of what do we have, and changing your lens to what you do have rather than what you don't have can be massively helpful in kind of grounding us. We talked about the body, but I also think we talked a bit before we came on air about the noise. I think it's really, really pervasive at the moment. My husband and I were watching telly the other night, and in between the program, the adverts for Staying Safe came on, and I was like really cross. I was like, can we not just have a couple of hours where, I'm in my home? Can I not just have a couple of hours where I'm not reminded of this damn virus? So, keeping the noise out, not consuming so much news if it's panicking you. We have a tendency when we're feeling unsafe to want more information, because we think with more information, I'm going to have a handle on what's going on, and that's going to make me feel safer. But actually what's happening is, because the news isn't so great and it's conflicting and confusing, if you leave one channel, you're like, we've got this, the vaccines are going out like crazy. And on the other, there's a new strain over here. So it's really conflicting and confusing. So I think trying to keep a handle on how much you consume is also, I notice that when I consume less news, I can forget about what's happening out there a little bit more, and focus on kind of nurturing myself, and my alarm bells aren't kind of kicking off quite so much. Yeah,
totally agree with that. I mean, I consume a lot of news on apps, generally on the phone.
And
it's really difficult, because every news story is pretty much related to the pandemic, and it's a weekly quiz for schools. So 20 questions. I have to do it for every Monday morning, last the whole week. And so I'm asking questions that are not COVID related, because students don't need any more of it, frankly. And to get 20 questions about the week's news is so hard at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was easy, absolutely easy. I could rattle it off in half an hour. And then picking your way through all the noise is really difficult.
Yeah, and it's not just the news, is it? It's LinkedIn, Twitter, the social media channels. I'm noticing I'm spending a lot less time. It's done a lot for my Twitter addiction, because actually I don't want to scroll through death notice after death notice. And that's not because I don't care. It's because it can be quite overwhelming. Yeah.
I've definitely found the same. I've had, because I'm trying to keep an eye on Twitter for education news so that I can then tell people about it as and when it happens. Somebody suggested, which is basically saved my week, setting up a list, and there's just a few people that have that kind of the leaks, the information that's crucial. Everything else is noise, and so now I'm just looking at the list. I'm probably just looking once a day, which has made such a difference to my general stress levels, because Twitter was stressing me out. So, it's, you're absolutely right. It's kind of keeping the noise out where you can.
Yeah, most definitely. We've got some questions, shall we?
We have got some questions.
This is a bit scary and exciting at the same time. I normally do podcasts where I'm talking to a presenter, so having live questions is like, this is new.
Well, we'll look after you. It's going to be awesome. So Emma says, in my day job, I come across young people who have self-harmed, mainly overdoses that have been admitted. How do I broach the subject of why, and then how can I help?
A nice big question, Emma. I think when you're working with people in deep distress, it can bring up a lot of distress for yourself and helpless feelings of wanting to kind of, how do I help? How do I stop this person from either taking their life or self-harming? And I think one of the things we're trying to do as therapists, which can be quite hard, is not to panic, because these are coping strategies that someone has, particularly in self-harm. So not to judge and not to panic, and just to really be curious about whether they want to talk about what's happening for them. And everybody makes sense of their own kind of coping strategies. For some people, self-harm is a way of feeling alive. For other people who disassociate, it may bring them back into the present. We know that self-harm also releases endorphins, particularly if there's bloodletting. And so there's lots of kind of neuroscience about why self-harm it's unhelpful in terms of it causes scarring and injury to the skin. And I'm thinking about cutting here, but there are so many forms of self-harm. Overworking is a culturally acceptable form of self-harm, but I'm thinking of the kind of more obvious ones. So really staying alongside them and listening without judgment is probably really, really useful, and maybe might be enough. And of course, signposting to services that might be able to work with them more longer term if you aren't able to. There is no one thing to do, but just, to understand, be curious without judgment goes a massively long way, and to recognize your own panic when you're working with somebody who's in distress.
Fabulous, thank you. Emma, I don't know if you saw yesterday we had a self-harm specialist on, so that's definitely worth a look. We're going to pop in her contact details as well when she sends them over, so if you wanted any kind of further stuff.
It tends to be quite a longer term kind of support that's required, and people really let go of those kind of strategies when they're feeling safe, or when they have, asking people to stop. I used to work in a prison, and when you take away people's coping strategies, then it actually spins them further into crisis. So there's a lot of I don't know what, I can't find my word. I guess we're leaning more towards safer self-harm. Just like we do with drug users, we might have a care plan that involves safe injecting materials. We may have a care plan for self-harming, that you have clean implements, that you self-harm away from other people so you don't cause distress to other people, that your stuff's kept safe, and kind of looking at whether the self-harm is superficial, or whether and checking out whether your person knows when it's not superficial and when they need medical care. It's a little bit more on that.
Thank you. And then Debbie had a question. My son compares himself to what others, his peers, are doing, and this can cause anxiety. How can I help him ignore this?
I think, Debbie, don't ignore it. Help him ignore it. I think it's understanding and helping understand why he does it. And I think you probably can use your own experiences here. I'm probably betting you do it too, because I think we all do. We all do. We all kind of measure ourselves up or down. It's usually down, interestingly enough. You know, our not good enough self shows itself in many ways. Mine's like, oh my God, I haven't done a TED talk. I haven't written a book. They're not things that would particularly, the things that I would really struggle with. And so I'm quite happy just seeing clients. But on a tough day, those are the things I might go to. So it's about really understanding that we all can do that. And I think rather than trying to stop him, it would be really good to kind of just sit alongside him and say, you know, we all compare ourselves sometimes to other people, but they haven't lived your life and they don't have the same skill set as you. You know, it would take me forever to write a book. Some of these people whip them out in weeks. So it's about honoring that you have your own particular skill set. And so what you can do is really important. So really identifying what his strengths are, and there's some vulnerability required in life, that we're not good at everything, that we struggle with some things, and we can't be perfect. Often perfectionism, which is kind of what we're kind of leaning into here, is about warding off feelings of inadequacy and shame. And so to say to him, you know, it's okay to have these vulnerable moments. We all have them. But coming back to what are your strengths? What do you do? And that it's okay to be good enough. My message in life, and, you know, have somebody wanted to tidy up a video I did, and I was like, no, leave it. I don't need it to be all polished and perfect. It can be good enough, because I think perfectionism is a massive problem. It's the warding off of rejection and shame. And so modeling good enough, I sometimes see it, you know, I got 7 in an exam, and I'm obsessed about the 3 points I didn't get, rather than being able to give yourself credit for the 7 that you did get. So what we can do is really feedback. I think noticing effort is really, really important, because what we tend to do is tell kids, oh, you've done an awesome job over there. What's really more helpful is to be curious and say, how do you feel about that kind of piece of work you did? You know, did it take you a long time? Did you work hard on it? Yeah. Have you done your best? And if you've done your best, let's send it in and see how we get on. Yeah. So promoting a good enough, rather than and really trying to kind of notice that when we're kind of slipping into perfectionist role, often it's learnt behavior from our parents, and their anxieties, they get passed on, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes, I am a recovering perfectionist.
Me too.
Yeah,
me too.
With the videos we do, it's done's always better than
yes.
done.
Yeah, done's always better than perfect. But that's so hard, because what we have to do is we have to risk being vulnerable. We have to be, and that in itself, in people who've been very vulnerable, particularly people like myself who've had a lot of uncertainty and trauma, will guard up to do anything but to be vulnerable again. Yeah, I'm aware before I came on here, I was a bit like, oh, podcast. Yeah, particularly when it was live. There's a little part of me going, oh, how can I get out of it? That's my scared bit of my brain. So yeah, really helping your son to understand that vulnerability is okay. Doing your best is okay. Often when we can settle down and do it not perfect, it's often at a standard that is quite high anyway, because that not good enough self drives us to overachieve and overwork. And I'm aware that I sit here with often a not good enough frame, but actually my standards are fairly high. So leaning into that vulnerability, that your best is good enough, rewarding effort, noticing when they've done a good job on something, and really rewarding effort rather than achievement, because they don't always add up. You can spend a lot of time on something and it still doesn't look great, because that's just not your strength. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Very, very much. The hymn sheet we sing from. It's important. And then I guess going back to what we were saying earlier, it's then helping him have strategies for when he is feeling anxious, for when he does have that kind of that feeling.
Again, going back into the body, naming it. Dan Siegel's work is lovely. Name it to tame it. The minute you kind of name what's going on, it kind of brings your child's nervous system down a bit. I just did a video, actually. It's only a couple of minutes long. Lisa's just subtitled it and chucked it out. And it's about being able to hear the emotions rather than jumping into fix. And it's distressing for us adults and parents when our kids aren't doing so well. And we kind of want to jump in with solutions and rescue them from this kind. And I always say to my clients, sit in the muddy puddle with them. Just sit down in the muddy puddle with them and say, I get you're feeling really anxious. I feel like that sometimes too. We can normalize the emotions rather than try and kind of whip them away. And so you're building a resilience in, this is how I feel. I think you can also notice, I love Brené Brown's work on shame, and she kind of said, there's always a messy bit in the middle before you get to the growth. And so you can remind your kid, this is tough. There's a messy bit in the middle where we feel a bit anxious, but you know what? We can get through this together and we're going to be okay. And so actually you can support them through those wobbles. And actually I noticed that about myself. The process is I have a bit of a flap, but I do it anyway. I really wish I didn't have that flap, but that flap gets a little bit smaller as we practice stuff. We get our bodies get used to it. Yeah,
definitely. And you start to recognize the process within yourself as well. Because I've been terrible. There are things that I do sometimes within the business. So we're about to launch a new product. I'm busy writing the sales page. It's not so much my forte, and so I spent 2 days procrastinating and putting it off and finding anything else to do other than doing it, and then getting stressed because I hadn't done it yet. Sat down and just wrote it out in half an hour, and then I've just spent the day putting it together, and now it's finished. I'm loving it. But like through the process, yesterday I had such a tears halfway through the day that I literally sat on the sofa, put my jumper over my head, and just sat and breathed for a few minutes because I just needed to. No screens, no nothing, and that did the trick, because I know and I recognize those.
Procrastination's a bit of a free state. It's kind of like I'm overwhelmed, I can't see a way out, and so I do nothing, or I go and do something else in kind of displacement. So to notice that overwhelm and either break it down into smaller chunks, or asking somebody else to come in and help alongside you. I'm dyslexic, so writing is definitely not my fault. It's interesting because if I'm flinging stuff on LinkedIn, I'm happy with that. I'm comfortable in that little kind of box that, it'll be gone next week, spelling typos and ever. If you ask me to write an article for a magazine, you wouldn't see me for dust. Yeah. That feels a whole lot more serious. I have actually done 2 now, so I'm getting there with that one. But all of these wobbles are our kind of scared parts that and actually we can ask for help. We can, you probably didn't occur to you, but if you ask people what you do, they probably tell you better than you tell yourself than you can yourself.
It's one of the things we say to parents when we do. We have like a motivation masterclass, and we try and get kids to figure out what it is that lights them up. Like if you can design what your life's going to look like in 10 years, what would it be? And we say, ask your parents, because they'll see it so much more clearly than you can in terms of your strengths, like your almost superpowers, because you just take it for granted when it's you.
I think you kind of live with yourself every day, so you kind of see your kind of skill set and your story as ordinary. It's nothing special. But when other people hear your story or you see your skill set, they will spot it. I often say, another article that never got wrote, you're not the best detective for your own life. We ignore the evidence. We're the worst detectives. If this is a crime scene, like there's blood everywhere, but we're ignoring it. The compliments may come in and we may bat them away because it feels uncomfortable, because it disrupts that story that we've had for such a long time. I say compliments are a little bit like new shoes. You have to live with the uncomfortableness they create, and in time you get more comfortable with them. It's the whole
being able to just say thank you, rather than, somebody says, oh, that's a lovely outfit, and you're like, oh, it was £10 from Primark, and you feel
trying to shrink it down because it feels so uncomfortable. To say thank you for noticing, and just sit with and allow it into your bodies kind of slowly.
That's something I noticed about our 12-year-old. She, when you give her a compliment, she, oh, thanks. She doesn't ever sort of, oh, it's nothing, or she we must be doing something right as
long may
parents.
that last.
It fits with her narrative. She's able to accept it. It's not too big for her. I often say when I'm working with care kids, I'm kind of, I work in with a foster and adoption agency, and sometimes we can overwhelm people with too much praise. So sometimes it's better. I like the noticing. It's a little bit gentler. I notice you've worked really hard on that. Your awesome is kind of like, it gets thrown out. It's not as sometimes the big words aren't as powerful as the kind of noticing.
Specifics. Because it helps them feel seen.
And seen and felt.
So a quick point from Vicky saying thank you very much. Her 11-year-old definitely feels not good enough,
and this has really helped.
That's really helped. She's coming back later to listen to the rest, so she
Cool.
She'll jump back in.
A very quick shout out to Jilly. Yes, hello. Yes, we did work at the, dare I say it, the best academy in the whole of Stanground. Hello.
Goodness. Sorry if you're on the podcast, that's not going to make any sense, but you're just going to have to live with it, or go to the Facebook page and catch up.
It's okay. It's one of Paul's buddies.
So, Kerry has a question. Are there any apps or support that you would recommend for easing teenagers' anxiety and panic attacks?
They're not any different from adult panic attacks. I think that's a really interesting thing to say. A panic attack's a panic attack. They may be kind of badged up a little bit, kind of more kid friendly. I'm not a massive app person. I'm much more a in-person person. So you're probably the best person to manage your kids' panic attacks rather than an app. If I'm really honest, if you're available and around with them. I think the best thing we want to know is actually what can we do before they get to panic attack stage. Sometimes managing the climate before, it's a bit like when people say, what do I do with my kids kicking off and throwing things? I'm like, really want to kind of try and stop them getting to that stage. So maybe noticing when they're overwhelmed and stepping in a little bit earlier, monitoring, is this too much or too little for you? Like if we're going into a crowded place and somebody's starting to feel a bit uncomfortable, helping them to use their words to say, I need some time out, or can we step out the crowds? I know that's probably relevant right now. We're not doing crowds, but we'll come out of this eventually. So whatever it is that's kind of in the panic, what we really want to do is you can't really halt a panic attack once it starts, but what we can do is we can use our thinking brain, because they don't have any. They've kind of gone out of their thinking brain, their limbic system, the amygdala's going off like crazy. And so their heart rate is really high, and may have chest pains, and you feel like you're going to die. It's really frightening. And if you have, if you're not helped to understand them and deal with them, then you kind of almost have a post-traumatic stress response. I remember somebody saying that, I'm really terrified of telephone boxes. And I was like, what did the telephone box do to you? And she's like, her first panic attack was in a telephone box. So of course, every time she went near a telephone box, she would remember the anxiety attack, and they would come on. And so panic breeds panic. But what we can do is you can help your teenager by using your voice, your social engagement system, so you can use your voice. No one in the land has ever calmed down by being told to calm down. And that applies with anger too.
Particularly to a teenager.
What we can do is say, I can see you're panicking here. Get eye contact if you can. You might want to take hands too, because holding hands help to regulate. She'll feel safer if you've got her hands. And then what we can do is help her to slow her breathing down. As we slow the breathing down, we slow the heart rate down. And this is why breathing is, most people who get people to breathe don't tell them why. And that's really important, because if you don't tell them why, then they don't really buy into the process. It's like, oh, that's too simple, I'm not doing that. But when you slow your heart rate right the way down, you're sending messages up to your brain to say, turn the alarm bells off. Stop sending me adrenaline, cortisol, noradrenaline. You're also able, what your brain also does, it squirts a substance called GABA that calms everything down. And so helping somebody to breathe slower, and just bringing them down, bringing their heart rate down. And what happens when we bring the heart rate down is you do something that's called applying the parasympathetic brake. So you've got a calm and wobbly nervous system. And so that wobbly nervous system switches back to you've got parasympathetic and sympathetic. I never remember which one's which. The calm and the wobbly one works for me. And so it switches from the wobbly one back to the calm. So changing your breathing changes your physiology. Brené Brown did some research. What's the scariest job and how do they manage it? And she went to the armed forces, and the only way they stay in their thinking brains on the battlefield is they're taught to breathe properly. Yeah. Apps like Headspace, Mind. As I said, I'm not a massive apps person, so I can't think of any kind of major ones for panic attacks, but anything that works for adults will work with children. There are some lovely teenage books on well-being. I like Tina Ray's got one on that's just come out on well-being. The Sumo guy also has written a lovely book for teenagers on well-being. So there are some lovely books out. I'm much more of a books than an apps person. So I'm sorry I don't have anything else for you, but I have given you some physiology of how a panic attack works. And
with sorry.
Yeah,
so with panic attacks, I've seen so many more students in probably the last couple of years than I ever have done before have panic attacks. Is it something on the increase? And if so, why would it suddenly become more of a thing in the last year or so? Or is that just my experience?
I think there's an intergenerational pattern that if we've got adults with mental health issues and they have anxiety, then children don't learn the skills of calming their bodies and their systems down. So unless we have a lot more education and support around mental health, I think it's getting worse with the generations. I think we also have a lot more pressures on teenagers. They're tested. Schools. I'm sorry, schools, but they are brands and businesses with league tables, and so the pressures that's happening in schools. I've had students who've got a B, and the teachers, kind of push in for an A star because they're league tables. So that's not in that child's best interest. A B is fine. A B is good enough for her to go where she needs to go, but school want an A star. So I think we're made, the well-being should come first, but in a lot of the schools I'm seeing, the pressure, they go to school, they do all this work in school, and then they come home to another pile. So I think we're piling it on, and so some kids are buckling under the pressure of it all. We live in a fast, busy society, don't we? I also think the gadgets probably aren't helping. We're over processing information. We're busy brained all the time. I didn't get to stay up till 2 a.m. I'm old. I didn't get to stay up till 2 a.m. in the morning WhatsApping my friends. Yeah, now that's happening. So I think the climate is changing, and our bodies are probably responding to some of that. So I think there's lots of kind of factors that are making our children and our adults more anxious. Yeah. We could also add in socioeconomic kind of pressures, couldn't we? People losing their jobs, not being able to, when I left school, you go anywhere and get a job. Now it's a big old competition. And so, much, I think so many factors are impacting on our mental health. Yeah. That's a big answer, sorry, but I think it is a big answer. Yeah.
I've got another question about panic attacks. This is about me rather than, but I think it kind of applies to teens as well. So I think I'm fairly level-headed. I don't have any mental health issues, I don't think. However, when I go for an MRI scan, I hate it. I hate the build-up to it. I hate the actual process of it because of the claustrophobia. I don't see myself as being claustrophobic, but the build-up to an event, whether it's an MRI and it's me, or whether it's going back to school and you're a teenager or an exam or whatever, that run up and then the actual doing of it, what's the advice to try and sort of overcome that? Well, I guess it's anxiety that.
Yeah, it is anxiety. It's a situation that you've been in. You have a frame of reference for it. And if I'm going for another one, then I'm going to have to go through this process again. And actually, I don't feel safe in this tube. Why would you? It's not our normal habitat, is it, to lie still in a tube? It makes horrible, I've had quite a few actually, so it makes horrible noises if you don't stay still. We also know that metal and magnets cause, so there's all these anxieties about what could, it looks like an innocent tube, but we actually know that there's stuff that can happen in this tube, and so your body's responding. You've gone into your fight flight, and you're going into your fight flight in anticipation of having to go into this phase. I'm guessing what you can try and do, and I had somebody need an operation and had some of those same fears, and so as you're leading up to it, you can kind of use your thinking brain before you get while you're still in your thinking brain, to really remind yourself that you've been in this, a bit like we talked to the kid about, the kind of perfectionist stuff. Using your own self-talk, we can remind ourselves that we're safe. You are treated, you've got people there to take care of you. I think if you're really anxious, I'm anxious in the dentist. I didn't have a good experience with a dentist. You can also let your the people who are treating you know that you have a raised heart rate and you're anxious, so you can ask for the support you need. If you need the MRI to stop because you feel you can't get out, you can ask for the emergency buzzer, and so they can stop the process and get you out. I think we can tolerate a lot more when we know we can get out. Yeah, when we have a way to leave. And so when I'm in the dentist, I've let my dentist know that this makes me really anxious. I might need a bit more time. I also say to him, because they're messing in your mouth and he's quite close, I say to him, if I put my hand up, will you stop? I need you to stop if I put my hand up. Yeah. And he's like, okay, so you can establish your own safety needs, which will help to some degree. And it really is, as you notice your heart rate going up, if you focus on some box breathing, so 4 in, hold for 4 and release for 4. And if you maybe try and do 10 or 20 of those, what's going to happen is, while I'm focusing on my breathing and while I'm counting, I'm in my prefrontal cortex. It's really hard to panic and count at the same time. Yeah. So we can use, I'm a bit like that. I used to be a bit like, I have some kind of social anxiety stuff that has got better, but interviews used to be like that for me. I can remember going into a school and I needed to see the head teacher and kind of demonstrate some expertise in order to get a job. And I could feel myself dysregulating in the waiting room. And so what I was able to do is go, okay, we're getting a little bit flustered here. And I just kind of do the box breathing and keep counting. And I'm really taking my mind off the fact that I'm going in to see the head teacher, who actually wasn't that scary at all. And so keeping your heart rate low and really focusing on your breath brings you back. It stops, it applies that parasympathetic brake. Yeah. And so those are tools that we can use to try and calm ourselves down. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Give it a spin.
I mean, I think that was possibly free therapy for Paul, but it's going to help me when I next go to the dentist.
A lot of people, because what I really invite people to do is to try and remove the shame. You know, most people do not ask for what they need. We all have a trauma history, perhaps to some degree, things that set us off. So rather than they're traumatized and we're not, let's go for everybody is. And actually, what do I need to feel safe? When I went through, I don't like things over my face. It makes me panic. I'm a suffocation survivor. And so when I went for a facial, the first thing, rather than getting really worked up, the first thing I did was throw the shame out the window and say, I need you to know, please don't put any flannels over my face. She was like, okay. I said, I'll panic. If you can work on my face, but if you put anything over my face, it will make me panic. Then I can really chill instead of hiding it and feeling ashamed. And I'd be like this on the facial table, waiting to, oh God, is she going to put a flannel on my face? So owning what we need and asking for it without shame does take some vulnerability and work. One of the teenagers who was struggling with anxiety in assembly, I said to her, is there anywhere you sit where you feel safer? And you can all tell how safe you feel when you look at where you pick your seat in the theatre. Yeah. A lot of people want the outside seats. They don't want to be in the middle. They feel stuck and trapped. We like our exits. And so she was able to say, I want to be in the assembly, but can I have a seat near the door? Yeah. And her teacher actually said, you can't choose where you sit. And she, bless her, I taught her well. She said, I'm in therapy. My therapist says, I'll regulate better if I sit here than if I sit in the middle. So if it's not upsetting anybody for me to sit here. And the teacher was like, okay, fight for what you need. Yeah.
In a theatre, front and centre, love it. In a comedy show, at the back for me, because I always get picked on. It's the ears, apparently.
That's the shame and vulnerability, isn't it, of being put under the spotlight? Yeah.
It's a guarantee of being put under the spotlight.
Oh,
every time. Yeah.
I ended up being whole part of the show once. I was at one and I did get picked on. I got a hat on, so I was probably asking for it. And then he kind of wanted to know what I did. And I was like, I'm a psychotherapist. Oh, he had a field day. Had an absolute field day.
Goodness me.
We got some more questions.
We've got some comments. So Kerry, who asked about the panic attacks, wanted to say thank you. She that really kind of reassured her that she was doing the right kind of thing. She said thanks for the book recommendations. And Jilly was just agreeing with the pressures in schools. It's very much a trickle down thing. There is a lot of pressure on heads. There's a lot of therefore pressure on middle leaders, on teachers, which just gets passed along because that's how it is. So
absolutely right. It doesn't help that I've worked with kids with mental health issues, panic attacks, anxiety, maybe even school refusals, and I've even seen a mother whose kids aren't in school because she has cancer and she doesn't have long to live, and the welfare officers kind of sending letters. So sometimes you're like that. I always feel I haven't got a picture, but I've had a picture. It would be a bit like that. We're kind of holding everybody away and creating space for our children to stay well. That maybe they're not handing their homework in, maybe they're not doing something, maybe they're taking a mental health day, and actually that's about managing our own anxieties about if they don't get these GCSEs, life is over. And actually it's not. We sometimes forget that no, they're 14, 15, 16, they got their whole lives to learn. It's not over if they don't get them now. I didn't go to school till I was 28. Proper school. I did go to school, but I didn't get anything. I was too traumatized to hear half of it and disassociated. But at 28, I went back to school. So there's plenty of time, and that's what we're not giving our kids. Not all kids are academic either, are they? Some kids aren't going to do well at exams. Exams are just bloody memory tests, and some of us don't remember so well. But you give us you maybe give us a piece of coursework, and we might excel at that, or we might be able to repair a motorbike from scratch. So I don't think we. This goes back to your question about anxiety. We're not prizing the creative subjects. I absolutely threatened a kid that I'd stop her therapy if she stopped ice skating during her exams. I wouldn't have gone through with it, but I was like, please don't stop ice skating. That's the time where you're in flow, you're completely in your homeostasis, calm brain. That's where you come alive on the ice. Nothing matters when you're skating and doing your turns on the ice. That is better than any antidepressant. So please, the anxiety they have, they drop all their well-being stuff. And it's definitely not right way to do this.
Jilly,
I love you. Thank you for the stroke.
Oh, dear.
I'm on my soapbox, but I think it's probably all of our soapboxes who are interested in caring for our children. Yeah.
And it throws up a big question about when we get to the point where schools are back, in inverted commas, and we don't have the choice anymore. There are going to be a lot of parents. There are going to be plenty of parents who are like, thank goodness, I just want them to get back to school. But there are also going to be plenty who've said, you know what, no, this has been the making of my child, because they've actually thrived outside of that school pressure cooker.
Absolutely. When you take kids out, they may have had new interests, new hobbies. They may have done more creative stuff. They may be calmer children. Yeah.
Or they're just worried, like about bringing things home and causing issues for the family. You know, once they're back at school, they're not locked up in a house anymore, protected from the virus and things.
I think we're going to see a lot of anxiety arise when, as just like we've been closed down, we've got lots of anxiety. We're going to see a lot when we go back. The first one might be, will we fit in our clothes? Where are our shoes? But beyond that, I've got a most amazing pair. I bought a really expensive pair of slippers because I'm like, I'm going to be in these for months, so they may as well be comfy. So as we go back in, we're going to have some anxieties. I think we're also going to have some back to work blues that go on. I'm thinking of the people who don't have the hour commute on a train now and then have to go back to that. They're not going to want to. They're not going to want it.
That's a huge part of a working day, isn't it? Extra hour and a half on a train or a car or whatever.
Even first getting out and going back into the shops, for example, which is something that, I mean, we've been pretty much locked up for a year and not gone anywhere or done anything for the most part. We're getting our shopping delivered, so I'm not facing that stuff. I know if I went into Tesco right now, I would be very, very anxious, and that would really, really stress me out. And I don't know when we're going to hit that point where it feels okay again.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Everybody's going to have different thresholds for what they can tolerate, what their bodies can tolerate as we enter the world. Just like we often have phased returns back to work after long-term sick, we almost need a gentle, whether we'll get it, and we might have to think about how we can kind of give that to ourselves, a gentle phased introduction back into the world, and I think this is something employers probably will also need to think about, in terms of, you can't just go from this to that without our bodies kind of having, maybe some kind of wobbles around that. So it'll bring a whole new set of kind of challenges up for us.
How do you think that's going to work then for the teenagers who are told, it's the 8th of March and everything's okay, get yourselves back into school, and it's just gone from 0 to 1 million in potentially a day for a year group? Year 11 and year 13 will probably be first back, and they'll have them in for at least 2 weeks at a time. So
it's pants, isn't it? Utter pants, because there's no warning, there's no preparation, and that's been the whole, getting a bit political here, but that's been the whole thing, hasn't it? There's no warning, there's no preparation, there's no chance to get your head around it, find out where your bloody school uniform is if you've got to wear one. So I think
2 weeks warning this time around. Gavin Williamson has pledged it.
I think that will help. It will help people to kind of start to get ready. But again, I think this is up to you parents. You're in charge of your kids' well-being, so it doesn't matter if you. I'm a bit of a rebel. Sorry, you've really asked. If you want on, if you don't want honest, don't invite me on. I'm a bit of a rebel. If your kid can only manage half days, then they're only doing half days until they can manage full ones. You're in charge of your kids' welfare and well-being, and it takes a really, I think, courageous and strong parents to kind of almost put your 2 fingers up to the system and do what fits for your kid, and kind of face the wrath of the school welfare officer. They rarely prosecute, and I think you've got a bit of a kind of loophole at the moment, because by the time they've written all the letters and got them out, your kid will probably be back in school. Yeah.
Story. Gillian, I'm not holding my breath on that one. We shall see.
Gavin Williamson giving his word. Let's not
get into this.
That could be a whole 2 hours.
I think we know that words don't mean a lot with a certain population. Yeah.
Yes. We'll go back to the questions and we'll just skate past the political stuff
Go
before
for it.
Although Jilly says we should send you to Gareth, which is well, Gavin, I'm guessing, but yeah.
I'd like to find them all on that particular meeting.
Right. Vicky says, how would you help to manage an anxious child who has had all of his hobbies stopped? He's definitely feeling not good enough and presents as tantrums, frustrations, etc. No live teaching, etc. because he's in year 6. So she is indeed now back. Yes.
I really feel for your little Vicky. I feel a bit like your kids. All the stuff that I'm able to do has just disappeared, and I want to have a bloody big tantrum over it. It's not fair. It's not fair. It hurts. It's miserable, and we can really drop into that kind of like, kick off. Basically, he's dropped into his fight-flight brain. I think if you feed back that to him, the name it to tame it. Again, go sit with him in the muddy puddle. This isn't fair, is it? It's miserable. It's really horrible. We have to do this and we don't want to. One of the things I think we all have to learn in life, and one of the things I'm constantly repeating time and time again, is it's not our job to force children to do things. It's our job to support them when they have to do stuff that is really tough. The stuff you don't want to do, the stuff that you have to do, that you have to push through. So I would really start with that, Vicky, and say and name it for him. This is really tough, isn't it? You're missing football, you're missing your friends. You'd give anything to go and kick that ball around maybe with your mates. And then I guess once we've heard it all and we've soothed him down a bit, then we have to think about what can we control. What moving to, I had a massive gardening project in the summer that kept me sane when everything was closed off. I literally threw myself into gardening, and this winter I've thrown myself into kind of exercise with the help of a PT. I'm really not that motivated, and so it might be about looking with him about what new hobbies can we find to do? I've been chucking stuff on my Twitter that I kind of randomly think about. It could be anything from painting bean cans and growing a herb garden, making candles. It could be ordering a kit off Amazon of a racing car and painting it with him. It could be kicking around in the park. Whatever you can find to replace some of his coping strategies and his hobbies. Maybe it's a time to adopt a few new ones or try something new if he's willing to. We can't do this, but can we do that instead? So but really hearing the disappointment, try not to rescue him too quickly. This is tough, this is hard, it hurts, it's miserable. We can just name it for what it is. I think people have a fear that if we live in this toxic positivity world, that's another podcast we could spend hours on, and so we don't have to always keep kids positive. You just got to be strong and positive. It's bullshit. Let's just name it for what it is. That soothes kids down a lot better, and then help him to kind of adjust. What is he like? Can you give him a pick list? Go on Google 50 things to do on a rainy day, and see if you can find something that kind of lights him up or gets him excited.
It's been I think something that most of us have faced. I think during lockdown. I know. So I run a choir normally, and it's been close to a year now since we last kind of got a chance to meet and sing together, and that is very much my thing. That's the thing that lights me up, that gets me out of there. Forget everything, no more stress. And I've missed it, really, really missed it. And I've missed all the people as well. And we tried Zoom, it wasn't the same, and it just made me sad because I missed them more. So I've been having to try and find alternative things.
I feel the grief. I can hear the grief in your voice. It is. There's so many. Every turn at the moment, every corner we turn, we might find grief. It's mad things. I'm wearing new jewelry. I got some new. I don't wear jewelry very often. It's 10 years, and I've actually loved this little recycle company, so I've got 2 sets now. And it came, and it's like, I've got my new jewelry on, and I wanted to go out. It's just kind of like the grief arrived of, I can't go out. When we get new stuff, we want to go out.
I got around that by treating myself to new fluffy pajamas.
I must admit, I haven't bought any outdoor clothing, but I might have 1 or 2 more leggings than I should own.
To go with the fabulous slippers.
I don't know where any of my clothes are, the bottom half, that aren't joggies or pajamas now. I'm okay with that. I don't miss skinny jeans. I'm putting it out there. This is more comfortable. I'm just saying.
Absolutely.
So Vicky has added, he's become a little recluse, wanting more time on his computer, etc. Really tricky to manage, but this really helps. I'm not always empathic enough.
I hear you. I've got a tip for you for any parent who's got their kids on gadgets. I'm going to use my own example here. We often, when we're communicating, we tend to go into a narrative of blaming, and that can be shaming. So you're always on your phone. Yeah. If you use those words, you're always on your phone, they're going to go, and you are, or they'll shut down on you or wander off. The blame and the shame arrives, and the communication stops. I would go for a much more vulnerable communication. I'm going to use my nephew here. I've got a nephew. I went to pick him up for brunch many moons ago when we were allowed out, and he was on his phone, and I was like, what are you doing on your phone? Well, I was thinking, what are you doing on your phone? I want to talk to you. I haven't seen you for ages. And I thought, if I just attack him, he's going to shut down. So I said to him, who are you talking to? And he said, one of my mates. I said, you know what? I'm feeling really jealous. And he said, why? I'm really jealous. You're talking to your mate, and I came over to see you. I want to talk to you. I want to know what you've been up to. How's work? How you getting on with your girlfriend? And I said, would you mind putting your phone away? I miss you when you're on your phone. I feel jealous of it. And he put it away. He said, I said, can they have you later? I've only got you for a couple of hours. Yeah. Can I borrow you from your mates? So the pleas from a more heartfelt I miss you place are much likely to be kind of greeted and responded to. I miss you. Would you come out your bedroom? I miss you. I want to do something with you. I had a kid. When I had a kid, I thought I would bake with her or paint her nails or whatever. Come play with me. Works a lot better than you're always in your room. Yeah. And if the conflict's too high downstairs, then they'll always be in their room, because that's what teenagers do. They hide rather than come down for a lecture. Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
You can hear.
Yeah. Maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
some awesome stuff. Does anyone else?
Kind of sums it up, really.
Thank you, very helpful. So, if anyone else has got anything, then jump in now, because otherwise we're aware we're taking up lots and lots of Mel's evening.
I'm really enjoying myself, actually. I was a bit terrified of the live questions, but
we should do this again then. You just talked yourself into it.
I'm definitely up for another one. I like it's like Agony Aunt Mel, isn't it? I've always wanted my own show, Paul. Let's do it. Let's do it. It's a way to help more people that they're not often access therapy. So if it's helped people, then my heart is warm too. Yeah,
very, very definitely helped people. I can vouch that it's helped me, even if nobody else had put all the myriad thank yous we've seen come through. So
you're a star. Thank you very much for your time.
Massively appreciated. And you're definitely going to have to come back on again.
Definitely, anytime you need me. Pick a topic, I'll come on and answer questions.